Welcome, everybody, to the Fantasy Formula, and we're live for the very last race of the year in Abu Dhabi. And guys, this has been such a fantastic year. We dipped our toe in the water for live shows last year. We vowed to have more live shows this year. 24 races, 23 live shows, and a very special final thoughts video in Vegas later. I think the mission was accomplished. How are you feeling?
Yeah, pretty good, Adam. I think we had a banging 2024, a real level up from last year, and excited to see what's in store for 2025. Terry, what's your take on the season?
Yeah, for me, it's been an interesting season. Probably the first one I've played Formula One Fantasy with any sort of level of detail, rather than just coming on and providing a bit of text. So I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed these streams. I think the community have been great in terms of engagement and reaction with us, and asking these questions. And for me, I think it's just grown and grown and grown, and just been a fantastic season, really.
You hit the nail on the head, Terry. I think without our community, this show couldn't get into the places that it did this year, had the opportunities that we had to interview great people and do some great things. So thanks to each and every one of you. If you watched 1 minute or the whole season of our show, thank you. It's been really incredible. And hopefully we can keep delivering for you year after year. All right, a couple of quick things till we start the show tonight. If you haven't answered our contest question yet, head over to our base on the FanAmp app and let us know which midfield driver is going to score the most points this week. Also, make sure you drop your lineup. We've started receiving a few already that we can get into in just a few minutes. And then also, Greg, if you could just fire up the screen share really quick, I want to remind everybody about the FanAmp community survey. It is going on until the end of this race tomorrow night. Maybe we'll accept things into Monday morning a bit, but we want to make sure we can collect all of these results and share with F1 as soon as we can. And then we're also going to get these results and share them with all of our partners across the creator community so that they can have content around some of the findings too. So be sure you answer the survey if you haven't already. All right, guys, without further ado, let's jump into free practice. Woke up this morning, watched free practice 3, and the only surprise to me was that Ferrari still haven't quite found the pace yet. Terry, what'd you make of all that?
Well, I think Ferrari are just struggling in general, aren't they? If you look at their performances this weekend, I mean, I think I said on the last show, it's not a happy hunting ground for Ferrari going into this weekend anyway, in terms of, poles, wins. Pretty sure they've never won here. I'm pretty sure they've never even landed a pole position around here. Could be wrong on that one. It's certainly minimal. So I think they're up against it anyway. We obviously know about Charles's penalty as well. And it just feels like they just haven't got to grips with the car at all in any form of their running so far this weekend.
There was a moment in FP3, I think it was Ewan that shared it, where Charles said, we're absolutely nowhere right now. And this was the point where if Ferrari were going to change the setup in a way that would launch them into podium contention, I would have hoped to have seen some good signs of it by now. Rob, in a position like yours, I think you had mentioned earlier this week that you want to lean into Leclerc, particularly with the penalty. Does some of the findings of free practice impact your strategy at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if it was a Ferrari that we were expecting that represented what we've seen in Austin, in Mexico, in Monza, then I wouldn't hesitate to get Charles in. But the fact that they've just really been nowhere at all so far, I even worry he struggled to make it past kind of the front runners of the midfield. So I've completely gone off the boil. I think a lot of people are carrying Ferrari constructor from the last couple of races. So a decision obviously comes down as to whether or not, there's more than 10 points in it between Ferrari and Mercedes. As of right now, I'd say it's pretty even, because even though Hamilton was P3 and FP3, I've seen nothing from the Silver Arrows to suggest that they're objectively a better option. So, I'm sticking with Ferrari, but not really with any confidence at all.
That makes a lot of sense. I think the big thing when we consider some of the predictions for this week and the F1 Fantasy Tools Sims, Leclerc tops all drivers this week. Actually, I can move over to that while we talk about it. Leclerc tops all drivers in these Sims last I checked. Ooh, they've updated since FP3 and he's not anymore. Interesting. So Leclerc was all alone in P1 up until a few moments ago when they updated with FP3. And now it's McLaren, and then Charles Leclerc. So the initial hope of these overtakes, maybe a driver of the day if he got himself up into the podium positions, it looks like we've fallen off a lot of that.
Yeah, I definitely think it was already kind of overweight in Charles's scoring estimates. So whenever I was putting the sims in yesterday, I kind of knocked him down about 4 or 5 points, and it seems as though the folks over at Fantasy Tools have reflected that too. Piastri and Norris have actually been the only two beacons of consistency in the last 24 hours or so, I would say, among the front-running teams. Red Bull were all the way down yesterday in the bottom quarter of the grid, and I think that was another really differential option. Given Max's history here and Perez's likely last race, he obviously want to go out on a high. So even they're not really compelling. And you can see here the constructors, even though Ferrari have not looked convincing, they're still second. So it's not exactly a weekend for risky picks. I don't think. It's kind of just go with the reliability up the front and then kind of make up your mind based on what you can afford further down.
Not sure if we can totally see my screen where I have the constructors, but just to read it out to you for anyone who can't see it, McLaren at the top with expected points of 70.5, then a little drop to Ferrari at 60, then Red Bull down at 52.9, and then a pretty big drop down to Mercedes at 42.8. So still a decent gap between Ferrari and Mercedes if you're going between those two options. Like Rob said, the Red Bull constructor could be interesting if Perez can find the pace, because Max has been completely dominant at Abu Dhabi. Let's head over to the chat. Looks like it's starting to fire up already. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody. Radio Paddock, join us for one last one. Just one last one for this year. We'll definitely be back with more live shows next year. Derpy Cake, good morning and good afternoon to you. Hi, Alligator. Heartbox, thank you. It's been a really great season, but definitely thanks to all of you too. So going off of our new insights from the predictions for this week, Mattia wants to know, is triple McLaren the best move this week? And I think, to me, it depends on where you are in your standings, how much of a punt you can afford, and how much of a punt you need. But Rob, I want to know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've covered it off quite a bit this week because it's the best week of the season to have fun with your teams. And I really wanted to not go with Lando Norris this weekend, to be completely honest with you. I wanted to throw caution to the wind and hope and see something in practice that suggests that McLaren are not the objectively best option. But I think betting against them just feels like it could only go wrong. My differential as a result of that meant I'm likely going with Oscar Piastri on my 2X. But like I've said, there's nothing from Ferrari lately to suggest that they are a great pick this weekend. Mercedes are kind of there or thereabouts, and Verstappen is kind of in the mix, but hasn't really shown he's the best driver over a single lap so far this weekend. So I think triple McLaren are popular for a reason. And if you've got, to answer your question, a lead to preserve or a position to hold, then I think playing it safe with triple McLaren is the best way to go about things. I don't have a rank to preserve, to be honest, but I also feel like there's nothing that stands out to me to take a punt that would likely pay off unless there are DNFs. I don't really want to rely on DNFs to make my weekend or break my weekend. So I just settled for triple McLaren and threw the 2X on Piastri instead. What about you, Terry? Kind of what's your thought process around your team this week?
I've been limited by budget. I can't afford a triple McLaren, whichever way I look at it. So that's kind of ruled that one out for me. But I think Oscar's looked sharp this weekend. So I think if you're looking for a bit of a differential in there, actually swapping Lando for Oscar isn't actually the worst thing you can do, because they're both looking strong. And I think Oscar's looking equally as strong. No team orders. Yeah, we said last week that obviously since Lando's title challenges faded, they're under no team orders. I think Oscar will want to, prove himself, want to go for the win, try and secure that championship. I don't think there'd be any switching for this weekend, if I'm honest, from those two. I think they just want to take it home. So I think if you are looking for a difference and actually switching to Oscar might open something up for you with your budget, then I certainly wouldn't bet against it if you're trying to make some places up in the final week.
Well said, Terry. Yeah, now that Papaya rules are basically just don't run into each other, preserve the constructor's title. There's going to be no preferential treatment for Lando. So Oscar's as viable as he's ever been this year. Derpy Cake wants to know Albon or Zhou this week. Oh boy,
Zhou train all the way, just for pure. Because he's Zhou.
I'd agree. I have Albon in my team this weekend, but that's only because to get Zhou in over him would require a -10. So to enable Mercedes. So I think Zhou, if you have the flexibility with transfers and budget to afford.
For me, I've got to imagine that Williams can't sustain too many more incidents, and I have no idea what Albon and Colapinto have in that car this weekend. They're already taking 5-place penalties, so luckily the positions lost won't be too bad. But if any of those new parts don't work out well, you could have another DNF in what has been a season to forget for Albon. With Zhou coming off the grid, I love these guys like Zhou, Magnussen, Bottas that are coming off the grid next year, because if any of them do particularly well, we have a boring race at the top. You could have a freak driver of the day fall into the bottom of your team.
Yeah, and I think also it's not a happy hunting ground for Williams with a fully spec car, and we know they haven't got a fully spec car. Yeah, we've seen the good old duct tape out on his car this weekend already. So they've had to actually fly a team in to get the cars on the track with extra parts, probably stowed away in some hand luggage somewhere. It seems that way to get the cars on track. So, like I say, I think any problems they're going to run into it, and it's not a sort of track where I'd say Williams are looking dominant even at the best of times to get some points. So yeah, Zhou for me, and that Sauber's actually looked quite good recently with those updates. They've obviously loaded them in for next year, which bodes well if you're a Sauber fan, but actually it looks a lot more solid. The changes they made it look a bit more competitive in the middle there. So it's not a bad bet with Zhou or Bottas at the moment. It's certainly not as bad as it was at the beginning of the season, that's for sure.
We'll see how it goes for sure. Right now, I can guarantee you that I've got Zhou over Albon in my team. Looks like all of our friends are showing up in the chat today. Good morning to Mike, Nico, Racing is Epic, CX Kev. Looks like we've got the whole crew here. This is wonderful. Alligator has wild card left and 131 million in the bank, so we can go totally nuclear for Alligator today. I think my first question for you, Allie, would be, what is your position, and are you trying to defend or chase? But guys, do you want to take a little stab at what 131 million can do with no transfers to hold you back?
Probably Piastri and McLaren are top of my shopping list, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think it depends if, like as you say, Adam, you're looking for a chase or a preservation of your rank. And I do think if you're chasing, I think maybe consider moving away from Ferrari, getting Mercedes. They're less than 10% owned in F1 Fantasy Tools Elite Data. And I do suspect that, Charles could have a stinker. He may not get past, P11, P12, and, they're really out of the running for points. So I think, yeah, I'd say I'd start with a Mercedes differential and Piastri, McLaren, and maybe Norris.
And that allows you to, in that case, to run better midfield drivers. This combination has Piastri and Leclerc, and that allows you to bring Hülkenberg in. If you bring in Mercedes instead of Ferrari, that's another few hundred K that you could maybe upgrade Bottas through, or bring Hulk even higher up into a different driver. So that gives you probably some of the best options here. I've been getting a lot of questions about Piastri, Leclerc as a differential option. Piastri is a podium contender, and Leclerc maybe not with a big upside in terms of Grand Prix finish, but just collecting enough overtakes to play as a good number 2 driver. So I like this lineup as well.
Do you think that Lewis is a differential this weekend based on actually performing quite well in free practices, actually being a solid track for him, Abu Dhabi? Mercedes clearly probably want him to go out on a high, and actually, driver of the day. I know a lot of talk is it's going to drivers who won't be on the grid, but could you see a potential with a good result like a podium for Lewis, snatching driver of the day in his last Mercedes one with a bit of a sentimental vote as well?
Ooh, that allows me to give a couple of shameless plugs and shout outs here. I'm wearing the 5th Gear Garms sweatshirt of Lewis's very first title car. I forgot to give them a shout out earlier. 24 races and 24 contests. So we're thrilled to be partnered with 5th Gear Garms again this year. Thank you again for everything. I think Lewis could get driver of the day if that free practice result, that podium contention, holds up again. Generally speaking, we're pretty bored with McLaren finishing on the podium. I don't think Lando or Oscar will get it. So unless it's, Rob had mentioned earlier, all of the sentimental driver of the day in this last race, Lewis is in that conversation for me.
Yeah, especially when you feel the hype that's going around it. Yeah, I know even in UK, Sky are showing, lots and lots of Lewis specials, lots of goodbyes. Lots of stuff going on with Formula One and stuff with that Mercedes partnership ending. it might just put people into that mindset of actually a good result. Why not?
It's an interesting punt. I was tempted to bring Lewis in. He just didn't free up enough budget for me to upgrade one of my midfield drivers and make it worthwhile for me. If he was a little bit less, I think I could have snuck Lewis in and then gotten into a Hulkenberg and maybe talked myself into it. But he's so close to these front runners in terms of price that it made it hard for me. All right. Guys, let's get into a few lineup reviews because I know they're starting to fill up here. Let me know if you need me to zoom in a little bit more. All right, so this is Tony. Tony's got a nice big budget. And look at that option in the middle. You could do Norris, Verstappen, triple McLaren, Orlando, and Charles. I bet you of the top 5,000 teams which you're in, not too many can run that middle lineup.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I don't, is Terry, I really need to know, is Red Bull legit this weekend, or is it a matter of kind of just hoping based on Max's history here that he's in for another good result?
Do you know what? I was listening to Zach Brown on the pit wall during free practice 3, and he came up with a really good point where he said Red Bull may not be in the mix, but Max is. And I think that literally summed up my sentiments on not only the season, but also where you've got the differential in Max Verstappen. Because what he's saying is, if you look come qualifying, he expects to see Max in amongst it a lot more than what he is. Whether or not Red Bull as a whole will be, very doubtful. So I think in terms of that middle lineup, actually getting Max in, and also with Max potentially not getting pole but starting a couple of places down, his record around here speaks for itself. So if you can get Max into like that middle one, I'll be tempted to try it.
And especially you think about last week in Qatar, they sacrificed Checo's entire weekend to figure out how to optimize Max's car to perform in the race, and it panned out. I think they're going to continue to do whatever it takes to just make it work for Max. He's an expecting dad now. And we've clearly seen after last week that winning the title doesn't mean that he's going to go any easier. He's just not going to make any really bold decisions in terms of risk and contact. So I like Max as good as anybody this year.
They're out the constructors, aren't they? So it's not as if they've got that to play for either. They're not in the mix anymore. So it makes sense for them to, especially with all of the speculation around Checo, it makes sense for them to prioritise Max anyway. They normally would. We all know that. But it makes even more sense for them to sort of sacrifice Checo again for a good weekend for Max to finish the season on the high.
I'm going with the middle team.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yes.
All right, another 3 lineup submission here. So Rob, the chat has been listening to you. These are Mercedes lineups with either Ferrari or McLaren. And then who are we going to have among our top 2? Lando Charles, Lando Oscar, and Lando George Russell. Remember, George still has the best average qualifying position since the summer break. So he's no slouch. But does he have the same upside as Oscar, who's a podium contender, Charles, who's trying to come up from the field with that 10-place grid penalty?
I've probably got to go for the team on the right, to be honest. I mean, the middle one is tempting, but you kind of got your eggs spread across 3 different baskets. And I'd always find it very difficult for myself to run a team where you're backing a double up on both drivers, but not the constructor. So I think the team on the right, I just think Ferrari are, in my opinion, the weakest of the 3 teams if we're excluding Red Bull from the calculation. And by process of deduction, I think I have to go the team on the right. That was the team I had last week as well. So, or more or less. So I can't fault that.
I think I've actually got the team on the right as mine. So it'd be wrong me to say anything with a difference in constructors, but I've actually got the same driver lineup as that. So yeah, that's where mine firmly is.
Rob, I think your first point was so well said with the middle lineup, where if you're heavily investing in 3 different teams, you're going to be wrong somewhere. So you'll just average to hopefully be okay. Whereas when you invest a little bit more heavily into 1 or 2 constructors as the last team is, you're really planting a flag and then you have a higher upside there. So I agree with both. Team 3. All right. This is a quad box here. So I'll read it out in case the details aren't as clear. All 4 teams have Ferrari, McLaren as a constructor. So then it's Lando, Charles, Lando, George, triple McLaren, and I don't see a difference between these 2. So maybe it is just 3 lineups. So I think for me, it's basically a very similar decision, except do you want a piece of Mercedes or do you want to go all in on McLaren or Ferrari? I'm leaning toward down here as the safer option, but this is the week for punts. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I like the Lawson punt. He's owned by less than 10% of people in the elite data. If I could afford anyone aside from Joe or Albon, he and Doohan would be top of my shopping list for this weekend at the same price. And so, I think they're the kind of differentials you really want to be looking for if you're not shuffling around your 2X or picking Mercedes as a lower end constructor.
A great point about Doohan. Remember, you think back to Ollie Behrman earlier this year. If you put up points in your F1 debut, you could be in the mix for driver of the day. So Jack Doohan could be a good shout. When you think about Lawson and Yuki, they're right up there with Checo is having so much to play for this week. A good performance this week could factor into the calculus of who pairs with Verstappen next year. All right, this is which midfielder. So this team, I don't think I see a name here. Oh, it's at the top in the corner. Shadow. Okay, one of our previous contest winners. They're dead set on Norris and Leclerc, but then who's the midfield driver? Sonoda, Gasly, or Hulkenberg? Terry, let me ask you first, since you always put me on the spot.
Oh, I don't think the Alpine's looking strong around here, if I'm honest. Not seeing enough in race pace for them to treble. Hulkenberg, I fear, maybe a good qualifying and then a drop down. So it probably leans me towards Yuki on just that thought process, if I'm honest. They've got a new front wing on that V-carb. They're trying out for next year. It's got a bit of performance difference, so I'd probably look at that one. But for me, it's a toss-up between Yuki and Hulkenberg rather than Gasly. I'm not sure that Alpine have got a pace coming in yet, which makes me want to select them over those two. But I would lean towards Yuki on the basis that I think it has to go backwards from their qualifying.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think Yuki is a great option for this weekend. Again, like his teammate Lawson, very low owned. He's got a great history at this track as well, I might say. He had his best ever finish in 2021. P4 here. He won driver of the day here last year. And he's averaging 12 points per race in the last 3 races, including 2 points finishes in Sao Paulo and Vegas. So I think he's got all the momentum and makings of a differential midfield driver that can, really pull your team up.
I agree for exactly that reason, Rob. So it's a clean sweep of Yuki Tsunoda.
Plus, hasn't he led for about 7 minutes around here as well?
He did too last year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I think that's why he got the driver of the day. There was that frantic moment of,
There was that
oh my
bit, wasn't
goodness,
there?
a well-timed safety car. Yuki could win the whole thing.
Yeah, we had 7 minutes of Yuki winning the race.
So the season has been throwing up some firsts for me all year. This is the first ever 6 lineup submission.
Wow.
From Feint. Now, luckily, they've done us a solid and not changed up too much with respect to the constructors and the midfield drivers. It looks like double Sauber Colapinto versus Colapinto Bottas K-Mag, and then you just focus on the top, and it's every permutation of top drivers.
Gives me a bit of a headache looking at this, to be honest.
I think
Number three.
I can't tell if you just picked your favorite number or if you legitimately like Charles with the 2X and Verstappen. I do. I think you've ordered them pretty fairly here. This first lineup is triple McLaren, who we think will be strong. K-Mag with a good shout for driver of the day and a strong midfield driver. Number 2, you have Leclerc coming up through the midfield, potentially getting those overtakes. Still a top 3 or 4 shout in points. Verstappen with the strong history here. So that's a good play. You'd have to really be into a punt to put the 2X on Leclerc, given what we've seen so far. And then the lineup that Terry had proposed earlier, where you bring in Lewis, free up that extra budget for a K-Mag, and then you really hope that something clicks with Mercedes this weekend.
I think Michael in the chats put his hand up and said this is his team. But
Has Michael got any chips left? Because I would go number 6 and autopilot it.
Yeah, that's actually not bad chat. I think in terms of the midfields, he's I really like the kind of Bottas and K-Mag combination because they're both driver of the day candidates, and it looks like Team 6 is probably trying to get maybe Lewis in on the action too there. But I think if you're going for reliability, Team 1 jumps out to me instantly. And I think the further down you go, Adam, as you pointed out, based on the ordering, the more differential it looks.
I'll tell you, if Team 6 doesn't get the driver of the day, I'm a monkey's uncle. Hamilton, Magnussen, Bottas. One of them's got to get it, right?
Michael says he's got final fix he can use.
Look at this. Real time. So that's the other good news here is that you can roll this out there, see what plays out. And if Charles's qualifying pace is terrible and you run one of these lineups, you get him out. If you run 1 or 6 and he's wonderful, then maybe they've unlocked something through the data from free practice 3 and then you bring it back.
You could easily swap out Leclerc for Piastri as well, right? So if he has a stinker, I mean, I don't know if he qualifies P9, right? He's starting 19th. Even if he doesn't make points, he'll still pick up quite a few overtakes and position gains. So
yeah, I don't want to complicate things, but these Leclerc teams could all have Piastri, like a Piastri Verstappen. That's a fun team too. All right, how do we think Lewis does this weekend? Look at you, chat. 40% of you think he's going to finish P1 through P5. I'm with you in the green chunk of the pie here. 60% says P6 through P10. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that Greg didn't even make lower than P10 an option because it's just unacceptable at this point. The car will hold up. Lewis will be a beast. He will get points for Mercedes. Just a matter of how many. There's Mike. Mike wants to know if we're worried about Leclerc. A little bit. We're growing a little bit concerned. I think for someone like you, Mike, who has a bigger budget and a little bit more to play for, the team on the left is safer. The team on the right, I'm leaning more toward because my lineup just dropped across all the socials and I've leaned more toward a Leclerc lineup just to take a punt and see if he can get me a few extra points. I think the floor is still pretty high for him, but the ceiling might be where I struggle this week. So safer is the team on the left. Risky, but potentially interesting team on the right.
I agree.
Yeah.
We're having a big lineup week. Thanks everybody for submitting these teams. All right. BZ is in the chat. It looks like Brian has invested in just one of the teams. Usually we see the Eau Rouge and the 130 ARG.
They're probably later on.
I wonder which one this one is. All right. So you have a 107-point lead in your mini league. So I imagine you're just looking to cover off with a safe team. If I was trying to play this team safe, I would probably switch your 2X to Lando and just cover off any combination that your opponents could have here.
I do think 2 Williams is risky.
It's not great.
And I still have them.
It's not great, but law of averages, how many DNFs can Albon possibly get in a row? I imagine they'll want to keep it clean this week.
I think the limit doesn't exist this season.
Yeah, this is Williams' season. Yeah, I'd be moving when lose out.
They're driving around paper mache at the moment, so I'm not holding out hope it's going to see 2 cars to the end.
Got shares in duct tape.
I'm okay with this lineup because if you get out of Williams to get the extra million or so for Zhou, then all of a sudden you have to drop out of Leclerc and Piastri, then you're down into a George Russell, Carlos Sainz kind of tier. I don't think Albon's that risky this week.
I can't wait to clip that.
Don't do it. All right. I'm going to take one more for now, and then I want to show you the latest tool that just dropped from our friends at F1 Fantasy Tools. So this is... My eyes went straight to the team that has Haas at the end. I'm going to say big no to Haas.
Yeah.
Regardless of the fact that you can run Leclerc and the two McLarens.
Yeah,
I'm thinking. I think team 1 and team 2 look good, but I'd move that 2X to the McLaren driver.
Yeah, on both counts, I probably would.
Unless you're going for deep punt, like you're down 100 plus points in your mini league and you have to make some moves, then you put the 2X on Leclerc and hope he works a miracle. Rob, any thoughts from you on this?
Yeah, I have to agree. I think if you're betting against McLaren, you're hoping for a DNF. and nothing less than that, because I don't see Lando Norris or Oscar Piastri not finishing a 1-2. I think last week was a perfect example of that. They were both in the box seat for a good result, and then obviously the flags and the safety car came out that ruined Lando's race, and I think Oscar was in the mix at the very least for a podium up until that point, and he obviously landed on the podium. But I mean, it was a weekend again that I think McLaren were expected to do well at, and maybe fell short just a little bit just because of things outside their control.
And guys, this wouldn't be the fantasy formula if we didn't remind you that Oscar Piastri has the streak of consecutive laps. He would be just the 14th driver all time, the 14th instance all time. I think the 4th different driver to complete every racing lap of the season if he finishes the Grand Prix tomorrow. So something to consider if you like hexes or if you think Oscar will keep it clean.
I think there's a couple of things as well. Yeah, we saw that smoke in Carlos's car, which someone's alluded to in the chat. I just caught at the corner of my eye. So we don't know if that's playing a part. Charles is only a battery, not a new engine. If it was a brand new engine, as in the whole lot, I'd say that turned up to the max, nothing to lose. He'd be coming back through, but it is only a battery change they've done. And also Mercedes looking good on a warm track when we know they generally perform better on a cooler track, which is what it will be later on and for the race, probably doesn't bode well either. So you kind of expect Mercedes to actually increase their performance due to the track temperature dying down as well. And then, just based on what we've seen over the past few races for Mercedes, they like the cooler weather a lot more than what they like the hotter weather. So the fact they're performing quite strong in the heat actually bodes well for the race.
Very interesting finding, Terry. I'll take all the Mercedes hopium I can get. So just a few moments ago, F1 Fantasy Tools launched the season summary tool. I feel like this V2 suite, they've really taken just everything up a notch. I want to walk you through this very quickly just so you can see how your team performed over the course of the year. What are some of the insights you can get from this right away? The first thing you can see here is how many transfers you completed over the course of the year. My team had 46 transfers over the first 23 races, so I was definitely moving around quite a bit. I only took the transfer penalty on 3 occasions, but I wonder if that's too much, not enough, or just right, depending on how some of you did. So I'd love to compare and contrast some of these results with all of you. And then I love this tool to the right that talks about the transfer impact per race, because you can toggle how many additional points did my transfers gain, and then how much additional budget did my transfers enable for me. And so if you want to look at a particular race, you can just click on the bar, and then you'll see the moves you made, as well as the points delta and the cost cap change delta. So you can really see those moments throughout the season where you made the right moves, or if you scroll down, the ones are a little bit more painful for you. Then moving into points distribution. So now you can see who did you run the most of the total points your team scored, which constructors, which drivers scored the most points, what point type contributed the most. So this was race position, overtakes. These were some of the things that contributed to my point totals the most. Then there were positive events. So how many fastest lap driver of the days and fastest pit stops did I hit out of a total of possible 126? And then similarly, you can look at this by race. I got a piece of the fastest lap from Norris and the constructor, a piece of the fastest lap from Ferrari as the constructor. Zhou was my driver of the day in McLaren for fastest pit stop last week in Qatar. And then the Rob Memorial category of negative events. How many DNFs and DSQs did we hit this year? I hit 15 out of 110. I imagine for you, Rob, this would be a bit higher and contributed to some of the challenges you had throughout the course of the year. But this is another thing I want to compare with all of you. How lucky or unlucky was I? When you click on this too for Canada, you can see I 2X Leclerc, who had a DNF. The Ferrari constructor had each driver DNF, Sargent DNF. So you can see the breakdown of how those negative events contributed to some of your worst outcomes. One last thing I want to mention here is you can click this crown on the top and you can see Andrew, our guest on the Fantasy Formula earlier this week, the P1 team in the world. He was a fair bit luckier. He had 4 fewer DNFs than me over the course of the season. And then you can see the races that he succeeded in. Perhaps this will help us track to how we can be the best global team next year too. Guys, any thoughts or questions on this before we jump back into lineups and chat questions?
I think it just highlights how dreadful of a season I had when I input my team into it. So it's really insightful. They continue to take the game to the next level, and it's the most, I would say, most utilized tool out there for fantasy analysts that help guide their decisions every weekend, aside from the obvious FP and simulation data F1 shares with us. So these guys are trailblazers for F1 analytics, F1 fantasy analytics, and continue to be impressed by what they do every single update.
Two other things on this. One is that they've added a suggestions box on the bottom. I know they've been programming it right up until the start of our show today, and they want to know what the community would like to see here because they still have lots of data at their disposal that they can give us. So do be sure to let them know your opinions on that. And then also with the F1 fantasy game, once the season's over, plus or minus a couple of weeks, all of that data from your team is lost in the game. But F1 Fantasy Tools, if you subscribe to their Patreon, they're going to keep this data year over year so you can access it at any time. So just subscribing for 1 month to their Patreon will allow them to lock in your data for 2024 and keep it for future seasons. So it's money very well spent if you invest in that subscription. All right, guys, where do we want to go next from here? We didn't cover off the gambling lines. It tracks very similarly to the Rider Sims with Norris and Piastri at the top for the Grand Prix win. Verstappen climbing. This is qualifying winner. Verstappen very high up there as well. There's some faith in Charles Leclerc that hasn't really been borne out in the free practice data. So we'll see on that. And then I don't think did they not post the Grand Prix winner yet? I think they're just starting to update some of this stuff now throughout the hour. So it looks like in a lot of cases, Charles Leclerc's fallen off, of course, because of his penalty. Lots of action around McLaren and Max Verstappen. All right. How's the chat looking, guys? Is there some stuff we should catch up on?
I think there's lots in the chat we need to catch up on looking at that. It looks quite intense in there.
All right. I'm going from the middle where I left off, but feel free to stop me if others have given us some questions here. Arigato MF wants to know, how should I best utilize the final fix? Just sit back and watch qualifying. Let's see if something crazy happens here. If you have a front runner that is knocked out in Q1 or Q2, you might be able to final fix them in and get some of those overtakes. Abu Dhabi is a top 5 overtaking track on the grid the last 2 years running. So surprise qualifying finishes are probably the best way to use final fix. Gazelle K wants to know Leclerc or Piastri. Depends. Piastri is the safest. Leclerc with the overtakes, if he pulls out something great in qualifying, could be a good shout. Olivia go ahead.
I was just going to say quickly, Adam. Someone made a good point to me earlier around kind of going for Piastri or Norris, and I'm going for Piastri solely because it's different. And even though I don't think he's going to score as many points as Norris, it's not really going to really change my season too much. I think the thing about mixing up your DRS 2X this weekend is that Norris is still very much fighting for the championship P2 position, and it seems likely now that Leclerc's probably not going to seriously challenge him with that grid penalty. But in any situation where there's a safety car and Leclerc's suddenly thrust back into the top 4 or 5 spots, then I do think team orders would, I imagine, come back into play for Piastri. For Piastri and Norris. And I think for that reason, Lando's probably in the box seat for a slightly more reliable points outing this weekend compared to his teammate.
You bring up an interesting point about the championship, Rob. I think back to FP2 yesterday, Ruth Buscombe-Divey was talking about the lack of data on hard tires. And so Charles, starting probably between P10 and P15, might go with a differential strategy that if the hard tire doesn't quite work for those front runners, he could be in the box seat to move way up, either naturally through that tire strategy, or he could be on a differential pit stop strategy, hanging out amongst the top 5. You're one safety car away from being thrust right back into the mix of things. So great options there. Michael would like to remind you, Rob, that Rob with Albon on his team is a guaranteed DNF.
Yeah, I was just looking at that history of of Albon in my team this season. It's not a pretty picture. I had him in. I'm pretty sure I had him. Okay, I had him in Japan. I don't know if I had him in Imola. I had him in Canada. I had him in Netherlands when he was disqualified, Singapore, and then missed him the last 3 in a row. So I dodged that. Fingers crossed he stays out of the wall this weekend.
Stefan wants to know Alonso or Hulkenberg over Magnussen. I think in his last race, with really nothing to worry about, I'd take Magnussen over both of them. What do you think?
Terry?
Yeah, I mean, Alonso seems happier this weekend. I'm not sure if that's because it's the end of the season. He doesn't have to drive that AMR 24 anymore. But yeah, I just, again, I've not seen anything from Alonso and Aston Martin that makes you think they're going to rocket up anyway. I think they're qualified where they are and kind of stay where they are, if I'm honest. Maybe make it up a couple of places. So I don't think they're a good sort of option for gaining some points somewhere.
Jeremy in the chat says, can we get Rob appreciation for coining the term Jovertakes? Absolutely. All glory to you, Rob, for Jovertakes.
I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can take credit for that. I feel like I repeated it from someone else last season, and it's kind of just been a staple of what we've referenced on this show in the past. So I don't know if it was you or someone else, Adam, who was a fantasy creator, but I definitely.
Can I tell you what I'm not into? Last week when he finished P8, people tried coining the term joints. I'm down with joints. I want Jovertakes.
Jovertakes is good.
Yeah.
I see Ewan in the chat. Thanks for joining, Ewan, and thanks for those kind words. You were a big part of why the game's growing and just elevating the game for all of us. So we're definitely in this together. All right. I'm going to hop back over to lineups because we still have a few more. We've got some more polls in here. So far, the Fifth Gear Garms contest question, which midfield driver scores the most points? Overwhelmingly, K-Mag over Bottas and Hulkenberg. So that answers that question from a moment ago. It looks like the chat prefers K-Mag.
And I assume there's still time to enter the competition, isn't there?
There is. Yeah. Competition probably has about another 8 or so minutes. So if you haven't answered yet, do let us know. Terry, let me ask you. I heard earlier K-Mag has a new race engineer this weekend. Not a lot of news around this from Haas, but is that true? And does that limit his upside?
He has got one. I'm not sure if it's a permanent one or not, to be honest. They haven't really communicated it, Haas haven't, in terms of what the changes are. So I don't know whether it's in line, obviously, for next season. With obviously 2 new drivers, it's a move they're just making, or whether or not it's just somebody for... We've seen various reasons this season, paternity leave, family stuff going on, long season. So we have seen a couple of race engineer changes this year just for, inconspicuous reasons and just family time and stuff like that. So it could well be that. But I haven't seen anything official whether or not it's a long-term one. I don't think it's going to make that much difference. They normally, when they make the step out, they've been working in the background anyway, so the drivers know them. They're normally a part of the team anyway. And a lot of the time, I know that Red Bull have done it quite a bit this year where they've actually brought someone up just for experience as well. So it could just be a bit of that going on. So, it's probably somebody who's already part of the team. So I think K-Mag be fine with it, to be honest.
Still something to play for. They're chasing Alpine and the constructors, and you're one Gasly DNF away from K-Mag's position in this race, meaning something. So fingers crossed.
For Haas, it's huge. If they can secure that, they're clearly going all out for it. And for them, it would be a massive boost to beat Alpine, that's for sure. So I don't think it's anything that's going to be at the detriment to the performance, put it that way.
The poll is confirmed. We're not likely to jinx Oscar. 88.8% of you thinks he will complete every lap, and that's probably where the odds favor as well. All right, hardly racing. All right, luckily these options aren't too spread out. It's combinations of triple McLaren and a McLaren and Charles Leclerc. And then the last option, I think, has double Sauber versus a piece of Colapinto. I would lean toward double Sauber in this case. But then for my options, maybe option 3 stands out the most to me. Triple McLaren being safest.
Yeah.
I definitely wouldn't take a -10 for all of this in the middle here. If you need to take a punt, you need to get wild. 2x on Leclerc, but knowing that that's a high volatility option.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I'd go option 3. I think if you can get to a triple McLaren without taking a -10, then you should certainly go that way. I don't think there's any need to do a -10 and actually lock yourself out of a triple McLaren.
Terry's agreeing with us this morning. Did somebody spike your coffee?
Last one of the season.
It's closer to 5 o'clock in the UK than it is in the US, that's for sure. Jeremy, look at Jeremy's team here. So he's got a toe in the water on Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes. Emotionally, I love that middle team.
Yeah.
Middle team. All day long.
Because we're here to give you good advice, Jeremy, the most sound, reasonable advice. I like team one the most if you want the most points, but that middle team is really interesting because now you get Tsunoda, his race history here. Hamilton, who's looking good, like Terry said, on a warmer track. Imagine when it gets cooler in the nighttime sessions. It's tempting.
Jeremy, don't listen to him. Go to the second team. Trust me.
There's the Terry. Now, I think this is interesting for Marcun that the font gets bigger. There's original, option 1, option 2, option 3. At least that's how I read it. Ooh, I don't know about Carlos Sainz this week, though.
Not shown anything really, has it? I mean, that's what I would say about Carlos. It's not really you hope for in the final race, but more sentiment than on viewing, I'd say, currently.
Yeah, I think option 1 is kind of the theme, right? That we've been going with more or less so far, I'd say.
I agree. And to expand upon that, here's option 1 to the extreme. Look at this lineup. Pete Brower, you can afford.
What's the comment, Adam, up above?
I still have wild card love the streams. Thank you. And thank you for coming. Look at this team. You could do triple McLaren, double Haas. Good for you. First glance here. Give me a piece of Magnussen and Bottas for driver of the day and a farewell race. What do you guys think?
Oh, I like the driver of the day cover off with the second team from the left. But let's talk about just Jack Doohan quickly, because Ali's mentioned him in the chat, and there's a bit of his teammate sprinkled into the right-hand 2 teams. I don't think we've talked about it a whole lot this week because there's been a few more talking points that have maybe overshadowed his addition to the game. But can I get your download from both of you on his viability this weekend, if it's worth his price tag at 10.9 or it's an avoid for this week with limited trades most people have on the table?
I mean, for me, if I've been seeing Alligator right, she's saying Doohan or Lawson. I would be tempted to go Lawson rather than Doohan, if I'm honest. Doohan hasn't got the updated parts on his Alpine. I think we need to remember that. So he's literally driving Ocon's car, so he hasn't got the new front wing on it that was introduced at last round. They're not 100% sure if it's there and just hasn't been fitted for the fact there's no spares. So it could be going on for qualifying. But as it stands, he's got a slightly downgraded car than what Pierre's going to be driving with. So I think that coupled with everything would make me lean, in this case, certainly towards Liam Lawson, if that's what Alligator's saying the 2 options are. I think, again, for Jack, I've not seen enough to really say that there's going to be anything spectacular. I don't think the Alpine have looked spectacular around here in any form whatsoever. So I think he's just a case of a driver who's come in, and I don't think there's going to be enough sentiment around driver of the day and bits like that for him with everything else that's going on from that point of view as well. So with all of that in mind, it's kind of maybe not put him into any sort of context is probably where I'm going with it.
I agree. And for me, you need a very specific slice of drama to make this work, where Gasly is out of the points. You have both Haas chasing in on him and Doohan saves that Constructors' Championship position for Alpine. Not super likely that will happen, but if that scenario plays out, I could see driver of the day, extra points, things like that. But otherwise, I would probably stick with similarly priced assets through Haas or some of the other midfield teams.
If I was to play devil's advocate on my Australian countryman for just a second, his qualifying position is probably going to be around P18 once Albon and Colapinto take their grid penalties.
Yep.
And he won the feature race here 2 years ago. Last year with Invicta. So he has a good omen at this track. I don't suddenly think he's going to turn in a performance for the ages with a victory again. But I do think, starting this far back, and if there are a few retirements, he's at least probably got a floor of about 5 or 6 points if all things come together.
In a week of punts, if you need the extra points, I mean, it's certainly worth a shot too. Who knows what he's capable of so far. All right, guys, one last lineup, and then we've got to blast through a bunch of stuff. Lots of chat questions left. We still have the contest and our final thoughts. Derpy, welcome back, Derpy. Non-triple McLaren options. Norris, Russell with Hülkenberg in the middle stands out to me. What do you two think?
I would actually go to the second one. Track temperature is now 12 degrees down on FP3, which is going to play into Mercedes' hands in qualifying. Bit of live update there.
For those of you playing at home, the second one and the middle one are the same team.
Yeah.
Rob, what do you think?
Sorry, my microphone just had a moment. Let me try and look at this. These are my non-triple MCL options. I'd probably go the team on the left or the team in the middle. I think Sainz is a bit too much for me. I don't know. I think I'm probably lower on Ferrari this week than most other people are. If I had enough trades, I'd move away from the constructor entirely. But I think it's probably going to be the one on the left with Leclerc and Piastri or Russell and Norris.
The chat and the lineups have come out in force so much, I didn't even share my lineup. So let me do that really quickly. I'm sticking with Lando with my 2X. Safe, high points upside. I think he finishes on the podium and McLaren locks down the constructors. Lando locks up P2 over Charles in the Drivers' Championship. So sticking with that. I'm taking the punt on Charles. I know I've recommended to some of you Piastri over Leclerc, and I think he's a much safer option. I'm banking on a different tire strategy, and Charles is just constantly dropping down the field with pit stops and then running up the field from overtakes, and that will ultimately get him back in the mix. Rob and Terry, did you post your lineups?
I did. I posted them.
Oh, yeah. I'm the worst. Do you guys want to fire off some chat questions while I pull up your responses?
Yeah, where have I got to? I'm down the back there. So, Jeremy's got some free transfers. Sorry, I'm going from the bottom up. Jeremy, definitely go crazy with Lewis. Yep. Based on nothing bar sound of voice.
Let's see what else is there.
Quick peek at Rob's team first here, going triple McLaren, 2X on the Aussie Piastri.
Yeah,
Piastri, if you will.
Would love to have got Mercedes and Zhou in, but that's a -10. So yeah, the most differential I could really go was to throw it on Oscar. I think, yeah, as I said, Norris is a slightly better pick for this weekend, but hoping something crazy happens and Oscar can capitalize.
Terry has promised going with Norris and Russell, and sneaky. I see that autopilot chip, Terry. So if anything befalls Lando Norris, George Russell could get the 2X boost. And if you ran this lineup last week, guess who was getting the 2X? It was Zhou who outscored Norris and Russell. So
I still could swap out Ferrari for Mercedes because I've got a transfer. I'm still toying with that idea with however long I've got.
If you do it, you get 7 minutes. If you do it, give us a shout.
As I keep seeing the track temperature fall, it keeps making me wonder.
All right. I have all of the contest entries. I'm going to jump them into the wheel and we'll do our final spin of 2024. Let's see. A lot of potential repeat winners in this group. And it is going to be a repeat winner. It's CX Kev.
Congratulations.
Congrats, Kev.
Thank you, Kev.
Good work from you. We'll be sure to send you your Fifth Gear Garms gift card. Lots of great deals going on that site now. And I totally recommend you all check them out for your holiday gifts.
Yeah, let us know what you get with them as well. It'd be nice to see some of the competition winners if they could actually tell us. Yeah, see what took your fancy in there.
I need some wardrobe inspo for next year.
Yeah,
too.
Definitely.
All right, guys, let's blast through the rest of the chat in our last 6 minutes and take it away into qualifying. Alligator's down to the last few seconds here and wants to know Mercedes or Ferrari as a constructor.
I've just swapped it to Mercedes.
Great call, Terry.
I've just done it.
Love it.
The minerals on Terry to go with Mercedes in the last 5 minutes. Good work.
I back that.
There you go, Alligator. I've swapped mine. Just if you want to go the same way, feel free.
Let's see. Andrew wants to know Hulk or Gasly. Hulk, probably.
Hulk, I would say.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. I'll go different. I'll say Gasly just based on form alone. I think Haas have the better race pace, don't they? But
yeah,
I think Gasly's looked the part the last 3 races, even though he didn't finish in Vegas. I'm going to back the man in form this weekend.
So one wants to know wild card or autopilot. Depends. If you hate your team, wild card. If you want to just hedge for anything that happens with the team you have, autopilot. Ooh. Let's see. Are there any other questions we haven't covered off?
Joe over Albon, I would go for. Just saw that one pop up at the last minute. If someone's locking it in.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I assume by now most people have settled on their lineups. There's probably not much to change with 4 minutes until qualifying kicks off. And
I'll tell you a couple of last things. The Global League, obviously, Andrew's locked up P1. We shared some drama earlier this week because the P2 team is actually a Team 2, so it's not eligible for prizes, which means we have a couple of friends in P3 through P6 that could get that runner-up prize. So fingers crossed that it's one of them that takes home second place this year. Rob and I talked to Laura Winter last weekend from Qatar. She is feeling very good about her team. Very happy that she's pulled a lead on Lawrence Barreto. So hopefully she can complete the first turnaround in that league as well.
Oh, I did see an interesting one. Someone has put Lando and George or Lewis and Oscar. I think that was Rick.
Lando and George.
Or Lewis and Oscar. I'll do Lewis and Oscar, Rick.
Oh.
Yeah, go have a bit of fun.
A bit of fun with it.
Yeah.
Oh, fine. Lewis and Oscar. Jonathan, Mercedes or Ferrari? We're firmly in go for the gold moment here. It's Mercedes.
Yeah, I've gone for Mercedes, Jonathan. If that helps you at the very last minute. So
if I could, I would.
I've turtled into Ferrari, but I'm starting to have some regrets. If you have any of those last minute questions, we'll hang out for the last 3 minutes here.
Oh, I love the Verstappen 2X Presangio. I think I don't know if Max wins, but I do think again, he's outperformed that car the last second half of this season. So I think he's a good shout for a top 3 fantasy scorer this weekend overall.
We swayed the chat now to give Mercedes. This could go one of 2 ways.
Everyone has YOLO'd it to Mercedes in the last 2 minutes. Good work, everybody.
It's going to be Hero Zero moment, isn't it? Come tomorrow night.
That's great. All right, we'll hang out for another minute, see if anybody has any questions. In the meantime, I'll just run through another round of thank yous. Big thanks to our team at FanAmp. They've helped us really elevate this show, and I'm so glad that we're all part of one big happy family for this year. Big thanks to Fifth Gear Garms again for providing these contest prizes each and every week. Very, very generous and kind to them. Big thanks to all of you for showing up, liking, commenting, getting the good word of our show out there to the community. It's really helped our growth this year. And guys, sentimental moment, but it's been great working with the two of you all year. Hope you have wonderful holidays with your family, and I can't wait to roll it back with you next year.
Yeah, it's been a great season, Adam. Thank you for the kind words. I completely agree. It's co-hosting with you guys every deadline stream has been truly such an exciting, part of my weekend. And, we've gone through agonizing decisions. We've gone through easy decisions. Regardless of how the season shakes out in fantasy, it's been a pleasure, doing this hour with you every week.
Yeah, I mean, for me, definitely. I mean, the highlight's got to be meeting in person. I think that will go down as a special part of the season, as well as obviously that great location to film that stream. But it's been great to be a part of it. The community's been amazing. Support's been amazing. One thing I will say is if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Just to, one, help us out, and 2, it will let you notify if anything drops between now and next season. Also, when we come back next year, you'll also be notified when it goes live as well. So that would help both us and you in terms of some housekeeping, and we would really appreciate it. But it's been great. It's been a great season. It's been great to get involved in fantasy formula from my point of view. And actually, it's been a really enjoyable part of the weekend to do this. And like I say, the discussion's great, and helping some people along the way has been pretty good.
We'll be back in about 2 weeks to summarize the findings of the FanAmp community survey. Make sure you fill that out if you haven't already. It's now time for some qualifying. Go out, enjoy the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, and good luck this week. And until then, thanks for watching.
Thank you, everyone.